Good morning, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Bankhurst, and this morning's guest is Jessica Circe. She is a performance coach, and I'm going to ask you, Jessica, to explain a little bit about your background and how you got into doing what you do today before we get into what it is you actually do, some of your roles and responsibilities.
Sure. So I was a professional athlete for 6 years. I rode horses professionally. Yes, that does make me a professional athlete. I rode horses for 6 years, but I've been riding since probably before I could walk. Horse crazy kid. And from the time I was very young, the idea was I wanted to ride in the Olympics. And my journey was cut short in terms of riding professionally. Not only because of injuries, but really because of what I would call a mental performance problem. This was 20 years ago. We didn't talk about mental performance 20 years ago, really, unless you were already at Olympic level. It wasn't something we discussed. So I made the decision to retire from riding and do something different, pursue another path. So I went to university in North Carolina and got a degree in mechanical engineering, and then found my way into a career that probably doesn't sound like it would be incredibly performance driven, but it actually is. I became a nuclear engineer, and I did that for 13 years across multiple countries. I don't live in the United States anymore. I now live in the United Kingdom, but I've lived in Germany, I've lived in France, I've been to Sweden, I've been in a lot of places pursuing that career. And that career may feel or may sound incredibly unrelated to performance and mental performance, but it's actually a career that taught me actually a lot. Because when it comes to nuclear energy and a nuclear power, nothing says perform under pressure like the choices between safety and revenue. And that's the choice you get when it comes to nuclear power. You can either lose $1 million a day in revenue, or you can go down a path that is possibly unsafe. And when it's unsafe, it's not just slightly unsafe, it can be really unsafe, as we've learned over time. So the choices of performance under pressure, there was no choice. So I learned just by doing it, by being in an environment where there was no choice. And I loved my career. I loved it. I learned a lot. I traveled a lot. However, it had an impact. My performance was necessary. And as a result, my health suffered. And in November of 2018, I was in a meeting. I was working very typical 40 to 60 hour work week, just depending on how the week was going. And on top of that, I had a business on the side. So sometimes my weeks were 80-hour weeks. And in the middle of a meeting, I dropped right in the middle of the meeting. Nothing incredibly serious, but just my stress and my health has started to become an issue. And that's when I kind of figured out that, performance under pressure is one thing, but performance under pressure and managing your mental, physical, and emotional health is entirely another. And that's when I started to kind of make that transition. It's like, yes, performance under pressure. Performance is how we measure anything, how we put value with anything. If you don't perform, you have no value. That is just the way the world has become. Athletes have to perform. People who work in offices have to perform. Everybody has to perform. That's how we determine somebody or something's value. And if you can't, then you're done. So performing is the baseline, but performing at what cost became my question. Was I willing to continue to sacrifice my health, both not just my physical health, but my emotional health and my mental health, in order to continue to do the job that I was doing and do my work on the side? The universe intervened, and I started my business couple years before that, and then went full time a few months after my health. If you want to call it a scare, you can call it that. And I just decided that while performance is necessary, performing and maintaining your mental and emotional health is the gold standard. It's not optional anymore. And that's kind of my goal is, yes, I want performance under pressure. I want the ability to perform and perform at elite level, but not at the sacrifice of your mental health. And that's what I do for my athletes.
Quite a different story to what most people on the show would give, right? Typical,
Yes.
I was an athlete, then I became a coach, or I got involved in sports. You went down a career path where, as you talked about, performance is crucial. And I think performance is crucial in my job. It's crucial in everybody's job. What you're talking about is almost balance, performing when you have to at the right times. But in order to do that, you have to take care of the other things that go on around that performance.
Absolutely.
Can you give an example or maybe share how you ensure that your athletes do that? Because most of us who are competitive, who have been athletes, who are in the world of sports, it's push, push, push. And we'll sacrifice maybe some of the things that we shouldn't in order to get to where we want to. How do you help those athletes keep balanced, keep perspective when I'm a 20-year-old who's, healthy as anybody and the world's my oyster and you're telling me to slow down?
Well, the first thing I always bring to attention is, what's the long-term goal? Like, do you want to have a career that's going to last 6 years like mine did? Or do you want a career that's going to last 15 years? Do you want to still be playing a sport at 38, 39, maybe even 40? Do you want the longevity of that career? Because yes, at 18, 19, 20 years old, sure, you don't feel the after effects. You also don't feel the after effects so much of going to the gym. But as you push harder and harder, and every level requires more and more and more, you feel more and more and more. And so I always start with what do you want long term? Do you just want a college career and you're great? Or do you want a career that's going to go on to the pros? Do you want a career that's going to go on to the Olympics? Do you want a career that's going to go on to Wimbledon or whatever the gold standard is, the World Cup? So I always start there. And then the other thing I make sure that they establish is a good routine. You have a pregame. Every athlete has a pregame routine. They've got a playlist.
I would argue that. I think a lot of people don't, but anyway,
we should. Let's put it that way. We should have a pregame routine. You've got a playlist you're listening to. I know an athlete who puts, one shoe on always first, because that's just the way it's always done it. Same shoe on first every time. And it's a routine that they practice before every game, in order to get ready. But why don't you bring that practice into daily life? Why don't you get up every morning and set intentions and say, this is what I intend for today? Or why don't you get up in the mornings and say, this is what I want long term, and visualize and use imagery and visualization to bring that to life in your mind? Because when you imagine it, your brain and your body don't know the difference of whether you're imagining or whether it's really, really happening. So if your brain doesn't know the difference, why wouldn't you get up and do that? Take that opportunity every single day to wake up and really imagine and think and almost dream about what you really want. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you get up every morning and meditate for 20 minutes to bring some clarity and some calmness before you start your hectic day? So it's these kinds of things that, you have a routine that you set before each game. Let's bring that into your life in order to bring some consistency, because the consistency is, for me, is what's key. You train every day for your sport. So if you're an athlete, you're practicing every day, you're going to the gym, probably every other day at a minimum, you're in the gym, but why wouldn't you train your brain that way? Why don't you train your brain every day as well? And a lot of athletes, I feel like they don't get that. Oh, I've got to train from the neck up as well. You've got to do both.
I would add as well that, you mentioned athletes don't get that. I would add as well that maybe coaches and managers and athletic directors don't get that either. And because of that, the athletes don't
get it. Yeah.
What they should.
You got to start at the top of the triangle and build down. The athletes are, they're at the lower end of the triangle. You got to start at the top and get them to understand that.
One of the challenges for people going into sports degrees or sports training, whether it's sports science, kinesiology, whatever, is what do I do when I graduate, right? And there's that kind of, I don't know. And I was the same way when I graduated, as I don't know what I'm doing. What should I do?
Yeah.
You've obviously created a path for yourself. And yes, it wasn't straight out of college, or you retired from horse riding and turned to this. But can you explain a little bit about how your business works? Because I'm sure there are those out there who would be interested in kind of following in your footsteps and doing something similar to what you do, but have just never really thought about it as a full-time vocation. A lot of times it's kind of, we'll do it on the side, but I really need to have that retirement plan or that pension or et cetera. So can you share a little bit about how you work?
Sure. I did do this part-time for a number of years. I worked I did my 9 to 5 with the pension, with the retirement plan job, and then was using my evenings and my weekends to work with people. And it's an exhausting way to live. It really is. And like I said previously, the universe intervened and I was able to go full time as a result of that intervention by the universe. And the way it works is just a determination of, when you talk to your athletes, you talk about, what do you want long term? What do you want? What's the dream? What's the goal? Where do you want to get? And it's the same for when you build a business like this. You have to know what you're wanting to build long term. You have to know it in detail. You can't just say, I want to be a mental performance coach and go with that. That doesn't work. You have to be able to say, this is everything down to, like, this is my ideal client. These are the kind of people that I'm called to serve. This is the impact that I want to have on my clients. So in the same way you would visualize free throws, or the same way you would visualize a course that you have to ride on a horse before you actually do it, the same thing applies. Is you have to know where you're headed. And maybe you don't have an exact detail, but it's like having a compass. You have to at least know that you're going east. Columbus set off and went east to get to west, or no. Yeah, west to get to east. And so it was, it's that kind of thing. You have to at least know what direction you're headed. And the more detail and the more you go, then you fill in the details of, this is the first goal. Like one of my first goals was my first paying client, my first paying athlete client. That was a goal way before I even went to started to do my business full time. Breaking the long-term dream down into small little increment goals in the same way you would as an athlete. You don't say, I want to be in the Olympics. You say, yes, I do want to be in the Olympics, but that's not going to happen, immediately. So how do I build to that? It's the same kind of thing. You build it piece by piece, referral by referral, athlete by athlete, coach by coach.
How do you market yourself? Because that's, owning your own business, working for yourself, in many respects, you have to be a master of many, many talents, right? It's not just I do this for my living and I know this
Yeah.
specialty and I'm valued here. You've got to
Sure.
be good at everything. And one of
Yep.
those is recruiting athletes to your program.
Yep.
Otherwise, you don't have a business. It runs out. Well, how do you do that? Do you use social media? Do you website? Is it through referrals? How does it work?
Most of my clients come to me through referrals. That's the way I would say most of the people come to me is, they know somebody I've worked with, or they know somebody that knows me, that kind of thing. I use social media a little bit. And I'm slowly starting, especially what happened, when COVID came into our world. I started using social media a lot more. But I find that that's just really, really good way to like let the world know who you are. People don't normally see your social media posts and go, oh, I'm going to call this person or email this person.
Right.
That doesn't really work that way. It's a great way to tell people who you are, what you do, and tell your story. And then the other thing that I do is, because it's stuff like this, is I get up and talk. I do webinars that I give away, invite specific. I did one for specifically people who ride horses. So it's like, come and let's talk about mental performance for equestrians. What's the difference between that and say somebody who plays basketball? So I'll do webinars. I'll do workshops. I do a half-day workshop where we talk about what I call a team saboteur that lives inside your head. And we really break down what's going on with the way you talk to yourself and the way you feel about yourself. It's all about around that self-talk and stuff like that. And just talking to people about what I do, not in that salesy, hire me kind of way, but just telling people so they know. And then when you are walking your path, if you put it that way, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People start to come and see you.
Do you have any situations where the coaches are looking at what you do and say, hey, come work with my team, rather than the individuals? Does that happen?
For me, it hasn't happened yet. Let's put it that way. I'm open to it, definitely. But I know it's something that is becoming more and more common. You see, living here in the UK, you see a lot of the like Team GB or England. They'll have like a sports psychologist, some mental performance coaches like on staff for like Team GB, stuff like that. A lot of the big sports. So we have the big three here in the UK. So cricket, rugby, and football or soccer. And the big clubs, they'll have staff for it, but they don't necessarily have in other sports, they don't necessarily have exactly people on staff. Normally they'll bring you in as a consultant to come in, do a workshop, come in mid-season if the team is struggling, that kind of thing. It's becoming more and more popular. It's becoming more and more necessary because, again, it's that performance. Teams that don't perform, one, they don't get the fan base. Two, they don't get the media attention. They don't get the money, the income, and the revenue coming in that if they're not performing. So if they're struggling, they'll look for somebody. They'll look for somebody to come in and say, our team is really struggling. Come help us. And, we'll come in either at the beginning of the season and in the off season and try and sort everybody out before the season starts, or come in mid-season and just say, let's see if we can get some quick fixes, get you guys back on path. And then come the off season, we'll start with everybody individually and really work on the skills.
I find it interesting the way you describe that, because I think it's pretty accurate in that most people working in sports, excluding the athletes, usually look for the Band-Aid once there's a cut, as opposed to how do we prevent the cut in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really important point, is you don't have to wait until things are going badly to get a mental performance coach. Please, as a matter of fact, please don't. That makes our jobs harder. It makes your job harder. It puts more stress on you. It puts more stress on us and our relationship as coach and athlete. Don't wait until things are at the dire edge. This is not because there's not a lot of quick fix. We're talking, it takes a minimum of 8 weeks to, train your brain to do, build new habits. So this is not really something that can, snap your fingers and fix.
That's a great point. The fact that this takes time, but a lot of people who are looking to hire you, and I've been in the same situation as yourself. It's give me the magic pill,
Yep.
so that I can get to where I want to be. And I know you can do it. And if after 3 or 4 sessions it's not working, then obviously it isn't helped. It's not helping. And then I would also say that there's also that challenge of you can't show me that it's working argument, where if I have a goalkeeper coach and I can show that, the goalie is saving 5% more shots than they did three months ago, look, I've been of benefit. Whereas in your situation, you're talking about 10, 20 years of somebody's career where you want them to be successful at 40, not just at 20.
Yeah.
How do you educate people on the importance that this is a long-term process and you don't necessarily see tangible results in immediate performance gains?
Yeah. I always make sure the 2 big ones for me are lifestyle and commitment. And what I mean by that, so lifestyle is mental fitness, mental performance is not a quick fix, take a magic pill. Anybody who tells you different is lying and trying to sell you something. This is a lifestyle. In the same way that going to the gym, practicing your skills. Like, you don't learn to dribble a soccer ball, dribble a football, and then never practice it again and then expect to be able to do it on game day or take a penalty kick. It just doesn't happen. You practice and practice and practice, and you practice all the time. That's why, you'll see the people who are regular penalty kick takers practicing it at least once a week. The same thing happens with mental fitness. The same thing happens with mental performance. This is a practice it every day. This is a lifestyle. You cannot be in a program for 8 or 9 weeks and get these tools and get this benefit and then go back to your old, where you don't practice your techniques. You don't practice your positive self-talk. You don't practice your meditation. You don't practice your mindfulness. You don't practice the tools and the things that you learned every day or 2 or 3 times a week. Because just like your muscle will atrophy if you stop going to the gym, your brain muscles will also atrophy over time. And we're getting to the point where you were talking about how we don't have tangible evidence. We're getting to the point now where actually we do. We're getting to the point now where you can start to see some of these techniques as if you put somebody under a functional MRI, you can see the parts of their brain light up in the areas that we'd like to, that we want to see them lighting up. And over time, you can see actually a difference in the gray matter. You can start to see like the brain actually looks different 8 or 9 weeks after practicing these techniques. But in terms of seeing it every day, seeing it within a day, within 2 days, no, you're not going to see it. The only thing you're going to see is your athlete feels better. And how do you measure they feel better?
Do you then, recognizing this and recognizing that a lot of parents or young athletes don't have the information that you have, that don't have the knowledge that this does change over time, do you then ask them to kind of work with you for a set period of time, or is it just a month to month? Because I think from your perspective, I would say, well, given this and given that it takes time, I would ask athletes or parents of athletes to say, hey, you need to give me at least 6 months, or you need to give me a year. Is that something you do, or is it just an open door policy of come and go?
Definitely not an open door policy of come and go. I'll do an intro session, where it's come in, try it out. But that's more to see, do we get along?
Mm.
Are we a good fit together? Because, working with an athlete, it's a type of relationship. And so, we're not talking about like romantic chemistry, but we're talking about you've got to be able to talk to that person and relate with that person. So, but there's definitely not I'll come when I feel like it policy. I usually say it's a minimum of 9 weeks. And that's 9 weeks with work every single day.
Wow.
Yeah. So but I'm not talking like it's not like going to the gym for 3 hours every day. It's, 15, 20 minutes a day, every day for 9 weeks. That's to start. And then after that, it's about maintaining that. How do you maintain that level? How do you maintain that kind of mental? I love to use the word mental fitness because that's exactly what it is. How do you maintain your brain muscles that you've developed in that first 9 weeks? It's like boot camp. And then how do you maintain that afterwards?
When you do that intake and you meet them, you start this process. In general, if I ask you to generalize, what would you say that most athletes struggle with the most? What do they need the most?
I love this question. I specialize in something I call hyperachiever syndrome. It's not a recognized syndrome, so don't please go look it up in the medical journals for hyperachiever syndrome. It's not a recognized syndrome. That's just what I call it. Hyperachiever, what I call hyperachiever syndrome, is something that I think most athletes have, and especially in the United States, because the United States has a general cultural predisposition of high achievement. Every parent wants their kid to be a high achiever, so they put them in piano and ballet and football, baseball, basketball, whether the kids have a love for it or not sometimes. So it's this, we want them to be, because we tie that, in order for them to be happy, they have to achieve a lot. And we tie those two together. So that's kind of our cultural predisposition in the United States. But then with athletes, it's very much, tied to the sport. What happens is when everything's going great and you're winning and you're improving and you're performing well, it's magic. Everything's wonderful. It couldn't be better. But when things go bad, it's almost the difference between a bright sunny day at the beach and a level 5 hurricane. It's when things are going bad, it's really bad. And what happens, the reason that happens is because athletes will tie, and I'm speaking from personal experience here in that I have done this. I tied my self-worth, my sense of identity, like I am an equestrian, I am a professional equestrian. If I'm not performing as a professional equestrian, if I'm not winning that blue ribbon, obviously, if you're not winning, guess what? You're losing. And there's that mentality of, if you're not winning, if you didn't come in first place, second place is the first loser. So when you're not performing at what you consider to be successful, that's when the stress and that's when the anxiety kicks in. And it becomes almost like a weight jacket that the weight jackets that you end up carrying. And this is what happened to me when I was in my riding career. I was struggling. I went to a barn where everybody was hyper competitive, and the situation was really, really stressful. And it was always about, getting the maximum out of the horses. And that, not being able to do that every single day, put a lot of pressure on me. And I struggled, not only in the show ring. It just started in the show ring, and then it moved into the practice ring. And then it moved into just pretty much every time I interacted with an animal. And when that happens, that's the beginning, kind of almost the beginning of the end, unless you can change it. What happens is if you deal with your hyperachiever syndrome is you detach that sense of self-worth, that sense of identity, and that sense of I'm a person from every trophy, every ribbon, every accomplishment. And you celebrate just being human instead of I'm a human that's won 10 gold medals or whatever goal you set for yourself. Because you're worthy of being celebrated regardless of whether you've won 10 gold medals or 2 gold medals or none. And then the gold medals or whatever goal you set, they become icing on this cake that you really, really celebrate.
Really interesting explanation of this. And I think while you were talking, you said you created a new one. I'm going to create one too. Parentitis. Problem as well.
Yes.
So coined here first, everybody. Make sure that we get in the journal articles. But there's that pressure, as you kind of intimated, from the athlete, but a lot of it comes from the parents placing that pressure on the child who, as you said, may not even enjoy the sport, let alone want to compete in it.
Yeah.
If I think back to kind of what you do as a living now, what are some of the maybe 1 or 2 things that you wish you had known when you got into this profession that maybe other people should be aware of if they're thinking about kind of doing the same thing?
Oh, thank you for this question. I love this. Probably the number one thing is the power of visualization and imagery. So whenever I would ride, this was, 20 years ago when I was doing this professionally, whenever I would ride a course, I would go to a horse show and I would, anybody who knows anything about riding horses, you go out and you know what the course is going to look like before you go in the ring. So if you ride the jumpers, you get to walk the course, but if you ride in the hunters, you don't. But you know what path you're supposed to take. I never imagined what it was like to ride that path before I actually went in the ring and rode it. So the first time I ever experienced what it was like to ride that course, ride that path, was the first time I ever rode it on my horse, which there's nothing wrong with doing that, but everything happens so fast. When you compete, everything is much, much faster than you really realize it's going to. So your muscles, react automatically if they're habituated, if they're programmed to. So this is what muscle memory is. If you don't have that muscle memory to do things, then you're going to miss things on course. And visualization really, really helps with programming in muscle memory. Because like I said, your brain doesn't know the difference. So if you're imagining riding this course over and over and like imagining it really in detail, it's the same as if you're actually riding it. And so that muscle memory will start to kick in as you do it more and more and more. And you'll start to realize, oh, I need a flying lead change here, or oh, I need to shorten up here, or I need to extend my horse's stride, or whatever sport you want to apply it to. Visualization is so incredibly important when you're practicing skills. And in times like this, in times like COVID, when you can't practice as much as you would like to, or you can't even practice at all because things are shut, visualization is that one thing and imagery is that one thing that you can still do that you will reap benefits with later when the gyms do open back up or when you can go back to practice. That's the first thing. The second thing is how you talk about yourself. Words matter. Period. So when you talk about yourself, if you talk about and you say, oh, I messed that up, or, oh, I messed that up, thus I'm a bad rider. The more you say that, the more you believe it. The things you say about yourself become the things you believe about yourself. So, and this is true across no matter what you say, whether you're talking about your ability on a pitch or on a field, on a court, or you talk about your intelligence. So if you say, oh, if you have this habit of saying, oh my God, I'm so stupid, the more you say that, the more you believe it, and it becomes part of who you believe that you are. So do yourself a favor. Be nice to yourself. Say nice things about yourself. Don't say bad things about yourself, because what you say, you start to believe.
It's great advice. Thank you. I know that a lot of people watch these after the live event, and if they have questions, want to follow up with you, learn more, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can email me. So the easiest email address to get to is jessica.circe@athlete-eq.co.uk.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining me this morning and sharing a little bit of your experiences. And I hope people do follow up with questions.
I appreciate it.
Of course. Just a reminder, if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, be sure to do so, because we try to offer these interviews each and every week, provide you with some insight into sports performance and sports in general, and also coaching, education, and development. But on behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, and of course, Jessica Circe, thank you so much for watching.